Okay, this video is going to demonstrate the need for wrapper classes, and also it's going to show how two ways to apply a wrapper class to convert a string to an int. So as we look at this class, we should have already saved this or changed the name to wrapper class PracticeA, and then have done a save as. And so also you should have a piece of paper out so that you can take notes, things that you might want to remember for later on as we go through this. And so you should follow along as we do the different activities on this particular file. So first of all, the thing to look at is notice that we have a variable who's declared to be an int, and this num1, this int, is supposed to take the input from the input dialog box and store it in num1, and then num1 is to be multiplied by 5 to get the value for product, and then this product will then be called later on. So the first thing I need you to do is to go ahead and compile this, see what the error is, and you probably want to make note of the error and what the problem is. So go ahead and do that, pause the video, and then come back. Alright, so when you compiled it, then you should have gotten a message that said that we have incompatible data types. The string cannot be converted to an int. And so what's happening here, we did talk about this in a previous class. What's happening here is that num1 is an int, but when an input dialog box is used, what happens is after the user, I'll create a input dialog box here. When the compiler comes to this particular line of code, what happens is it shows an input dialog box like this one, and it says enter an integer. The prompt is in the dialog box. It also provides a text box for the user to write or to type his or her input. And so let's say that the user types in an integer, let's say 15. Now then, that's this part of the input dialog box. Now this part here is going to then read it and recognize it as a 15, but it recognizes it as a string because an input dialog box always returns a string. So it's not recognizing it as a 15. It's recognizing it as a literal string 15, which is quite different. And so you can't store a string in an int. That's the problem. Num1's an int, trying to store a string. The compiler doesn't like that. So what I need you to do is to change this int to a string and then compile it and see what the new error is, and then come back to the video. Okay, so what should have happened then is you should have changed the num1 to a string, and so now the 15 can actually go in there. The 15 as a string can go into that memory location because it's a string and that's what it accepts. But now we have a new problem, and so as we compile it, we see that now it says there's bad operand types. For the binary operator, the binary operator is of course the multiplication symbol, which is a binary operator because it's operating the multiplication between two. By means two is trying to operate the multiplication of two new numbers. And so each of these numbers, of course, is called an operand, which you've already talked about before. Now, here's the interesting thing. It says that the first type is a string. So it's saying that num1 is a string. And that we've already said that, actually, because it's storing num1, or storing 15 as a literal string, not as an integer, because input dialog boxes always return strings. The second one is an int. The problem is the string. And so we have a problem, and so this has to be remedied now by what we call the wrapper classes. And so now we're going to demonstrate two methods of converting, using wrapper classes to convert strings to ints, so that we do not get this method or this message anymore. So go ahead and pause the video, and well, actually, you don't have to pause it. I'm going to pause it. Okay, what I need you to do now is to, well, actually, we're going to keep this as wrapper class practice A, because this is going to be the first method of using a wrapper class to convert a string to an int. And so what we need to do is we're going to take, first of all, string num1. We're going to change num1 to num1 str, capital S and then tr. All right, and then we're going to enter another declaration and call it int num1. So they're both num1 except for one has an str at the end. And so you'll notice that we have a num1 str over here, and this is going to handle strings. And then we have a num1 over here, and this is going to handle ints. So then the next thing we need to do is, we said that input dialog boxes always return strings. So we need to use the num1 str to handle or to accept the value of the input dialog box. And then we're going to make another, and I'm going to do a blank line, and we're going to go have another line of code here in just a second. So here's what is happening so far. So at this point, we have these two memory locations. One's a string, one's an int. And so this dialog box comes up and says enter an integer. The user types a 15 and clicks on OK. So because it's an input dialog box, it recognizes it as a literal string, 15, and then it stores it in num1 str, which is not a problem because it's a string variable. So num1 str now has a 15, that's a string, as its value. All right, so now in this line right here, we want to be able to multiply num1 times 5, but right now it can't do that because num1 is a string. Well, actually, the truth is that num1 has nothing in it right now. And so it's calling this variable, but there's nothing in it because we need to put a 15 as an int in there. Well, how are we going to do that? We're going to use a wrapper class. And so in here, we're going to assign to num1, we're going to go num1 is assigned integer. And that's the name of the first wrapper class we're talking about, is an integer class. And we're going to go dot parse int. And then use parentheses. All right, so parse int is the method, and it has parentheses as methods do. And so the parse int method is used by the integer class to convert the string. Well, what has the string in it? It's the num1 str. So inside here, we're going to type num1 str. So it's going, so in this line of code, it's going to call num1 str, which is going to return a literal string 15. And then the method parseInt then will act on that 15 as a literal string, convert it to a regular 15, and then store it, because it says is assigned. It's going to store it, num1, as a regular 15, as an int. So then this actually down here will then call num1, not num1 str, and get an int 15. 15 times 5 is 75, and so product has the value 75 in it. All right, that's the first method. You establish a variable to hold the input from the input dialog box, and then another variable or memory location that will then store the converted string. So that it stores an int in here. All right, so now we're going to show a second method. So what I need you to do is to pause the video and change this to wrapper class practice B, and then do a save as, and then we'll demonstrate the other method.